The sizzle of hot oil hitting the pan made Tessa Blake wince, jumping back as it spattered toward her chef's jacket. The last thing she needed was another grease stain before her first class of the night even began. Tuesdays were her Essentials of Italian Cuisine sessions, normally her favorite to teach at Culinary Canvas, the cooking school she'd built from nothing 5 years ago. Tonight, though, she was distracted, mentally calculating how many more private classes she would need to book to cover this month's rent increase. Chef Blake, Miranda, her assistant, poked her head into the kitchen. "Your class is starting to arrive. And there's a last-minute addition, some guy who paid triple to join tonight." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "Triple? Did he say why?" Something about his assistant messing up his schedule. Said he really needed to learn to cook tonight specifically? Tessa shrugged. Whatever the reason, the extra money would help. Set him up at Station 4, then. The cooking school occupied a converted warehouse space in what had once been a neglected part of the city. Now it was up and coming, which was why her landlord kept raising the rent. She'd designed the main teaching kitchen herself, 6 cooking stations arranged in a semicircle facing her demonstration area, each fully equipped with professional-grade appliances. Tessa checked her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door, tucking a loose strand of auburn hair back into her messy bun. At 32, she was proud of what she'd accomplished, even if the financial side remained precarious. The students filed in, most of them regulars who greeted her warmly. And then he walked in. Tessa had seen plenty of wealthy people in her classes. Cooking had become a trendy hobby for the well-to-do, and she could spot designer clothes and expensive watches at a glance. But the man who strode to Station 4 radiated something different. It wasn't just his perfectly tailored casual clothes or his confident posture. There was an intensity about him, dark eyes that missed nothing, a jaw that looked like it rarely relaxed. "Welcome, everyone." Tessa began, trying not to be distracted by the newcomer. "Tonight we're making classic risotto ai fungi porcini, followed by saltimbocca alla romana. Both dishes rely on technique over complicated ingredients." As she demonstrated the first steps of the risotto, explaining the importance of properly toasting the arborio rice, she noticed the man at Station 4 struggling with his knife grip. "Here," she said, approaching him. "May I?" He looked up, and for a moment, Tessa was caught in his gaze. Up close, his eyes weren't simply brown but amber-flecked and startlingly warm against his olive skin. "Please," he said, handing her the knife. "I'm completely out of my depth here. I'm Tessa Blake." She positioned his fingers correctly around the handle. "And you are Dominic Orosco." He adjusted his grip based on her guidance. "I should warn you, Chef Blake, I've never cooked anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. Everyone starts somewhere, Mr. Orosco. Dominic, please." His smile transformed his serious face. "If you're going to witness my culinary disasters, we should be on a first-name basis." For the next 2 hours, Tessa found herself gravitating to Station 4 more than she should have. Dominic was a disaster in the kitchen. He nearly burned the sage for the saltimbocca, and his risotto was simultaneously undercooked and overbrowned, but his determination was endearing. He asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the principles behind each step. As the class wrapped up and students began cleaning their stations, Dominic approached her demonstration counter. "I should apologize for the waste of good ingredients," he said, gesturing to his barely edible creations. Tessa laughed. "No apology needed. Learning involves mistakes." "I'd like to book a private lesson," he said. "Clearly, I need more help than a group class can provide." "I can check my schedule," Tessa replied, surprised at how pleased she felt at the prospect. "But I should warn you, private lessons aren't cheap." Dominic smiled. "Money isn't an issue." "My time is." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "Have your assistant contact mine to set it up." Tessa glanced at the card. "Dominic Orosco, CEO, Orosco Sustainable Construction." She'd heard of the company. They were behind some of the most innovative green building projects in the country. "I will," she promised, tucking the card into her pocket. After all the students left, Miranda cornered her in the office. "So, the hot guy at Station 4 booked a private lesson." "How did you know?" "Because he asked me about your availability before he left," Miranda grinned. "And I've never seen you spend so much time helping one student. He's not just rich, he's gorgeous." "I was being professional," Tessa protested. "He needed more help than the others." "Uh-huh. And I'm sure the fact that he looks like he walked out of a luxury watch advertisement had nothing to do with it." Tessa rolled her eyes, but couldn't stop the smile tugging at her lips. "Set up the private lesson for Thursday evening, and no, it's not a date." "Of course not," Miranda said with exaggerated innocence. "It's just a very rich, very handsome man paying a premium to spend time alone with you." Thursday arrived too quickly. Tessa had spent far too long deciding what to wear beneath her chef's jacket and how to style her hair. She finally settled on a simple pair of jeans and a soft blue top, with her hair half up in a loose knot. The kitchen was eerily quiet with just the two of them. She'd planned a simpler menu, a proper Italian tomato sauce and handmade pasta. Dominic arrived exactly on time, dressed more casually than before in dark jeans and a gray Henley that showed off his broad shoulders. "I brought wine," he said, holding up a bottle of Barolo. "I was told it pairs well with tomato-based dishes. It's perfect." Tessa took the bottle, their fingers brushing briefly. "Though maybe we should save it for after you've handled the sharp objects." Wise decision. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing tanned forearms. "I promise to try not to destroy your kitchen." As they worked, Tessa learned that Dominic had built his company from the ground up over 12 years. He'd started with small residential renovations focused on energy efficiency and had gradually expanded to major commercial projects. Why the sudden interest in cooking? She asked as she guided his hands through the pasta dough kneading process. Dominic's expression turned sheepish. "Honestly, I fired my personal chef last month." "You had a personal chef?" Tessa wasn't sure why this surprised her. Of course a millionaire CEO would have staff for years. "But he was stealing from me, not just taking food home, which I wouldn't have minded, but selling expensive wine from my collection." Tessa winced. "That's terrible." "It was the betrayal more than the theft," Dominic admitted. "He'd been with me since the beginning when I could barely afford him." "I thought we were friends." The vulnerability in his admission touched her. "So you decided to learn to cook for yourself instead of hiring someone new." "Initially it was spite," he said with a self-deprecating laugh. "I thought, how hard can it be?" "Then Tuesday happened and I realized I was completely clueless." "You weren't that bad." "My risotto was concrete, Tessa," she laughed. "Okay, it was pretty awful, but your pasta dough is perfect." He looked down at their hands, his larger ones now confidently working the dough. "I have a good teacher." The evening passed in a blur of chopping, stirring, and laughter. Dominic was a quick study once given proper instruction, and Tessa found herself enjoying his company immensely. By the time they sat down to eat the pasta they'd made together, the wine was open and conversation flowed easily. "This is incredible," Dominic said, twirling pasta around his fork. "I actually helped make this." "You did most of it," Tessa corrected. "I just supervised." He looked at her thoughtfully. "How did you get into cooking?" "My grandmother was Italian. She taught me everything when I was young." Tessa took a sip of wine. "After college, I worked in restaurants for years, then went to culinary school in Italy, came back and opened this place." "It's impressive," Dominic said, looking around the space. "You've created something special here." "Thank you." Tessa hesitated, then added, "Though honestly, I'm struggling to keep it going. This neighborhood's gotten so expensive." Dominic nodded. "Commercial rents are out of control." "It's pricing out the small businesses that give neighborhoods their character." "Exactly." Tessa was surprised by his understanding. "Most developers don't seem to care." "I care." His expression turned serious. "It's why I focus on sustainable projects that benefit communities, not just investors." As they finished the meal, Dominic helped her clean up, moving around her kitchen with a newfound confidence. "I'd like to book another lesson," he said as he dried the last pot. "Maybe next week." Tessa felt a flutter of anticipation. "I'd like that." He stepped closer. "And maybe after that lesson we could have dinner somewhere else. Not as student and teacher." Tessa hesitated. Dating clients was something she'd always avoided, but there was something about Dominic that made her want to break her rule. "I'd like that too," she said softly. His smile was worth any risk. Over the next 3 weeks, they fell into a pattern. Thursday evenings were for cooking lessons, each one ending with them sharing the meal they'd prepared. Dominic proved to be a dedicated student, practicing at home between lessons and sending her pictures of his successes and failures. After the third lesson, he took her to dinner at a small French bistro tucked away on a side street. Away from her kitchen, in a setting where they were equals, Tessa found herself even more drawn to him. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh with stories of construction disasters and difficult clients. "Why don't you have a restaurant?" he asked over dessert. "With your talent, you could be running a high-end kitchen." Tessa shook her head. "I did that life 60-hour weeks, constant pressure, no time for anything else. The school lets me share what I love without the burnout." "Makes sense," he said. "Balance is important, though I'm not great at it myself." "Workaholic," reformed workaholic, he corrected with a smile. "I'm learning to make time for things that matter." The way he looked at her made it clear she was one of those things. By their 5th date, Tessa knew she was falling for him. They'd graduated from cooking lessons to proper dates, hiking in the nearby mountains, visiting a modern art exhibition that featured sustainable architecture, and a jazz concert in the park. Each experience revealed new facets of Dominic: his dry humor, his passion for environmental issues, his surprising knowledge of music. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after they'd met, Dominic invited her to his home for the first time. He lived in a modernist house on the outskirts of the city, a stunning structure of glass and sustainable timber with views of the mountains. "I designed it myself," he told her as he gave her a tour. "It was my first major project." The house was beautiful but surprisingly warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and art that clearly meant something to him rather than pieces chosen to impress. "I thought you could supervise while I cook for you this time," he said, leading her to a kitchen that made her professionally equipped school look modest. "I'd love that," she replied, settling onto a stool at the large island. Dominic moved around the kitchen with growing confidence, preparing a mushroom risotto that was worlds away from his first disastrous attempt. As he cooked, Tessa noticed a folder on the counter with her school's name on it. "What's this?" she asked, touching the edge of the folder. Dominic glanced over, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Just some ideas I was working on for your rent situation." "My rent situation?" Tessa opened the folder to find property listings, financial projections, and architectural sketches. "I should have mentioned it first," Dominic said, setting down his wooden spoon. "I've been looking into options for culinary canvas. Your current location isn't sustainable with those rent increases." Tessa flipped through the pages, a knot forming in her stomach. "You've been researching my business." I wanted to help. He looked genuinely confused by her reaction. "I have experience with these issues. Did I ask for help?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Dominic's expression fell. "No, but you assumed I needed a rich businessman to solve my problems." Tessa stood up, suddenly feeling like she couldn't breathe. "Is that why you kept booking lessons, to figure out how to swoop in and save the struggling small business owner?" "What?" "No, Tessa, that's not. I mentioned my rent issues once in passing, and you've been, planning a whole rescue operation without even discussing it with me." She closed the folder with more force than necessary. "I built culinary canvas from nothing. I've solved every problem it's faced for 5 years without anyone's help." Dominic ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I never meant to overstep, I just thought, that's the problem." Tessa grabbed her purse. You didn't think about how this would make me feel. You just saw a problem and decided to fix it without considering that maybe I don't want or need fixing. She turned to leave, but Dominic caught her arm gently. Please don't go, he said quietly. You're right, I overstepped, but it wasn't because I think you're incapable. It's because I care about you and what matters to you. Tessa pulled away. I need some time to think. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Part of her recognized she'd overreacted, but another part felt genuinely hurt. Her independence was hard-won. The assumption that she needed rescuing touched a raw nerve. For 3 days, she ignored his calls and texts. On the 4th day, she arrived at Culinary Canvas to find a single red rose and a note on her office desk. I'm sorry. You're right, I should have talked to you first. What I did came from caring, not doubt in your abilities. When you're ready, I'd like to explain. That evening, she finally called him. Can we talk? She asked when he answered on the first ring. Name the time and place. They met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between her school and his office. Dominic was already there when she arrived, looking tired and anxious. I'm sorry, they both said simultaneously as she sat down, which broke the tension with surprised laughter. Ladies first, Dominic said. Tessa took a deep breath. I overreacted. The school is a sensitive subject for me. It's the first thing I've ever built that's truly mine, and I'm terrified of losing it. But I shouldn't have stormed out. Dominic nodded. And I should have talked to you before doing research. It's a bad habit seeing problems and immediately trying to solve them without stopping to consider how my help might be perceived. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. The truth is, I've never felt this way about anyone, Tessa. I think about you constantly. Your passion for cooking, your independence, your strength, they fascinate me. I wanted to help preserve something that matters to you. I appreciate that, Tessa said softly, but next time ask first. Deal, he hesitated. So there will be a next time. Instead of answering, Tessa reached for his hand. Tell me about these ideas of yours. Slowly, they rebuilt their connection. Dominic explained his concept, a new location for Culinary Canvas in a building his company was renovating, with controlled rent that wouldn't skyrocket with neighborhood trends. He wasn't offering charity. It was a sound business decision for both of them. The building has historical significance, so we're preserving the facade while modernizing the interior, he explained over dinner the following week. The ground floor would be perfect for your school with better ventilation and more natural light. As fall turned to winter, their relationship deepened. Tessa began to trust not just Dominic's feelings for her, but also his respect for her independence. He consulted her on every aspect of the new school location, valuing her input on design and functionality. In December, Tessa signed a lease for the new Culinary Canvas space, scheduled to open in spring. That same week, she gave up her apartment and moved into Dominic's home, which no longer felt like his alone but theirs together. One snowy evening in January, they stood in the empty shell of what would become her new cooking school. Workers had gone home hours ago, leaving the space quiet and full of possibility. Can you see it? Dominic asked, his arm around her waist as they surveyed the gutted interior. Your vision coming to life, Tessa nodded, leaning into him. It's going to be perfect. More class space, better equipment, room for the retail section I've always wanted. There's something else I want to show you, he said, leading her toward what would become her private office at the back of the space. He opened the door to reveal a small room illuminated only by dozens of candles. In the center stood a small table with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. What's this? Tessa asked, turning to him with surprise. Dominic looked uncharacteristically nervous. This room isn't on the official plans. I don't understand. He took her hands in his. When we first discussed the layout, you mentioned wanting a small private dining room for special events. I added this space, connected to your office, but I had an ulterior motive. He guided her to the middle of the room, where a perfect circle was marked on the floor with rose petals. "This exact spot," he said softly, "is where I realized I was in love with you. We were reviewing the initial plans, and you got so excited about the possibilities that your whole face lit up. I knew then I wanted to spend my life making you that happy." Tessa felt tears welling in her eyes as Dominic knelt on one knee. "I never expected to find love in a cooking class," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I signed up because I fired my chef and needed to learn basic skills. Instead, I found the woman who taught me that a life focused only on work isn't really living." He opened the box to reveal a vintage emerald ring. "Tessa Blake, will you marry me?" Tessa didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slipped perfectly onto her finger, the emerald catching the candlelight. "It was my grandmother's," Dominic explained. "She was Italian too and an amazing cook. She would have adored you." They celebrated with champagne in their empty space full of promise, making plans not just for the new school but for their life together. The new culinary canvas opened in April to rave reviews. The expanded facilities allowed Tessa to hire more staff, offer more classes, and finally achieve the work-life balance she'd always wanted. The private dining room became a sought-after space for intimate chef's table experiences, though Tessa always kept one night a month reserved just for herself and Dominic. They married in June in the garden of their home, surrounded by friends, family, and many of Tessa's former students. The menu featured dishes they'd cooked together during those early lessons: risotto, handmade pasta, and a wedding cake Dominic had secretly learned to make himself. "To think," Tessa said as they danced under the stars, "all this happened because you couldn't make a decent risotto." Dominic laughed, pulling her closer. "Best culinary disaster of my life. You're not so bad in the kitchen now," she teased. "Maybe I'll let you cook dinner once in a while." "Deal," he said, kissing her softly. "But only if you promise to always tell me when I'm about to burn the sage." A year later, on their first anniversary, they stood in the kitchen of their home, cooking side by side as they often did now. Tessa watched as Dominic confidently prepared the same risotto he'd butchered the night they met, now executed with perfect technique. "I have something for you," she said, handing him a small box. Inside was a tiny chef's hat sized for an infant. Dominic looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to wonder. "Are you?" Tessa nodded, tears of joy in her eyes. "Due in January." "I thought maybe you could teach our little one to cook." Dominic gathered her in his arms, his own eyes wet. "We'll teach them together." As they held each other in the kitchen where their story began, Tessa marveled at how differently her life had turned out than she'd planned. She'd built her school determined to never need anyone, only to discover that the right partnership made both people stronger. Their child would grow up understanding both independence and collaboration, surrounded by the legacy of two people who had created something beautiful together in the kitchen and beyond. And it had all started with a millionaire who couldn't cook, and the chef who never expected to find her forever in a disastrous first attempt at risotto.